Have you ever felt trapped by your own choices? As if every wrong decision piled up, creating a cage around you? Imagine a man endowed with superhuman strength, destined to be a hero, but instead finds himself betrayed by the passions and mistakes he cultivated. This man is Samson, a biblical character whose feats and tragedies echo through the centuries, bringing valuable lessons about power, weakness, redemption, and sacrifice. Once upon a time, there was a man of tremendous strength known to all as Samson. Now imprisoned in a Philistine jail, he looks back and reflects on the highs and lows of his life. His eyes, once bright and piercing, are now blind, but his mind is clearer than ever. He remembers the countless battles he fought, both on the battlefield and within himself. If only I had listened to my parents' advice, he thinks with a sigh. The prison bars cannot imprison his memories, and he shares his story with a melancholic yet hopeful tone. From a young age, Samson knew he was destined for great deeds. His strength was not just physical but also spiritual, though he did not always recognize this. He lived in a time of oppression, where his people, the Israelites, were subjugated by the Philistines. With each battle he won, he felt more confident but also more arrogant. Arrogance was my downfall, he admits. Back then it seemed that nothing could defeat him. But now, chained and humiliated, he understands that true strength comes from humility and faith. The beginning of his downfall started with his personal choices. He had everything to be an exemplary leader, but his decisions were often guided by desires and passions. How many times had his parents told him to avoid Philistine women? "They will only bring you trouble," they said. But Samson, stubborn and passionate, followed his heart. And that was exactly what led to his disgrace. Each forbidden romance was like a stone in his path, a stone he ignored until it became an insurmountable mountain. Even imprisoned, he cannot help but feel some nostalgia for his days of glory. He recalls the crushing victories over his enemies, the celebrations, and the songs sung in his name. "I was a hero," he reflects with a slight smile on his lips. But the memory of his victories also brings the painful reminder of his personal defeats. "If I could turn back time, I would do everything differently," he confesses to himself, knowing that this is an impossible possibility. Samson's life's tragedy is a lesson for all of us. He shows us that physical strength without wisdom is useless. "I had the strength of 1,000 men, but I failed to use my head," he says, shaking his head in sadness. It is a reminder that our actions have consequences, and that we must think carefully before acting. For Samson, each thoughtless decision was a step toward his tragic destiny. However, he does not succumb to despair. Instead, he sees his story as a warning for others. In the darkness of the prison, he finds light in the form of renewed faith. "God never abandoned me," he thinks. Even in the most difficult moments, Samson feels the divine presence, guiding and strengthening him. He recognizes that his fall was necessary for him to understand the true meaning of strength. True strength comes from faith and humility, he concludes. This realization is what keeps him firm, even when everything seems lost. Samson also reflects on the internal battles he fought. The struggle against his weaknesses and desires was often more difficult than any battle against the Philistines. "The greatest enemy is within us," he murmurs. He remembers how he often succumbed to temptations, ignoring the signs and warnings around him. These internal battles are something we all face, and Samson's story teaches us the importance of recognizing and facing them with courage. However, it is not just sadness that marks his memories. He proudly recalls the times he was a true leader for his people. "I inspired them to fight," he thinks with satisfaction. On many occasions, his courage and determination were a beacon of hope for the Israelites. He knows that despite his mistakes, he made a difference in many lives, and that for him is a consolation in the midst of darkness. As he reflects on his life, Samson realizes that each battle, each defeat, and each victory shaped him. "We are the sum of our experiences," he says. The scars he carries are not just physical, but also emotional and spiritual. And each one tells a story, a lesson learned. He hopes that his story serves as an example to others, so they do not make the same mistakes. The moments of solitude in the prison also serve for Samson to ponder forgiveness. "Does God forgive me?" he asks himself. This is a question many of us face in moments of reflection. Samson believes so because God is merciful. Forgiveness is the key to redemption, he concludes. And it is this belief that keeps him hopeful, even in the most desperate circumstances. Samson remembers his childhood, how he was a boy full of dreams and aspirations. "I wanted to be a hero," he recalls. And in a way he succeeded. But the journey was full of ups and downs, triumphs and tragedies. He now realizes that being a hero is not just about great deeds, but about wisdom, humility, and faith. These are the true qualities of a hero, he reflects. Samson's story is an emotional roller coaster, full of unexpected twists and turns. Each chapter of his life is a life lesson, and he hopes that others can learn from his mistakes and successes. Life is a great teacher, he says, and he, despite everything, is grateful for all the lessons learned along the way. Even in the darkness of the prison, Samson finds moments of light. Hope is a flame that never goes out, he thinks. And this hope is what keeps him firm, even when everything seems lost. He knows that his story is not over yet, that there are still lessons to be learned and shared. Samson believes that we all have an inner strength that we often underestimate. True strength lies within us, he says, and he hopes that his story inspires others to find and use that strength in their own lives. Never give up, no matter how difficult the path is his final message. And with that, he paves the way for the next part of his story, where the true battle between good and evil intensifies. For 40 years, the Israelites suffered under the yoke of the Philistines. This period of oppression was marked by a constant sense of fear and hopelessness. The Philistines' advanced technology, especially in the use of iron, gave them a significant advantage in battles. Philistine weapons were more durable and efficient than those of the Israelites, who still used bronze. This created a power imbalance that was difficult to overcome. With each confrontation, the Philistines' technological superiority became more evident, undermining the Israelites' morale. The Philistines, in addition to their technology, were masters of military strategies. They knew how to use their advantages to keep the Israelites under control. Their tactics were well planned and executed with precision, making it almost impossible for the Israelites to break free. In many instances, the Israelite forces were caught by surprise, with no chance to react. The Philistines' efficiency in battle left no room for error. Every move was calculated to ensure victory and maintain oppression. Philistine oppression also reflected in the everyday lives of the Israelites. Agriculture, trade, and even religious practices were controlled by the Philistines. They imposed heavy tributes and regulations that made survival difficult for the Israelites. With each harvest, a significant portion was confiscated, leaving little for families to sustain themselves. Trade was restricted, and Israelites were often forced to sell their goods at meager prices. This constant economic pressure wore down Israeli society, increasing despair even more. In the religious sphere, the Philistines not only tolerated, but encouraged the worship of their gods. This created a spiritual conflict among the Israelites, who were tempted to abandon their traditions for temporary relief. The worship of Philistine gods infiltrated Israelite communities, corrupting their faith and identity. It was a battle not just physical, but also spiritual. With each altar erected in the name of Philistine gods, the Israelites lost a bit more of their identity and strength as a people. Resistance, although present, was fragmented and often disorganized. Without strong and unified leadership, the Israelites struggled to mount an effective defense against the Philistines. Small groups of rebels emerged here and there but were quickly crushed by the Philistines. The lack of cohesion among the Israelite tribes made the oppressors' task easier. Every attempt at revolt ended in failure, leaving a trail of despair and resignation among the people. The Philistines used fear as a powerful weapon. Any sign of insubordination was severely punished. Public executions, tortures, and exiles were common, creating a climate of terror that paralyzed the population. The message was clear: any attempt at resistance would be mercilessly crushed. This tactic of fear kept the Israelites submissive and demoralized, preventing them from uniting against the common enemy. Samson's figure emerges in this context as a symbol of hope. His prodigious strength and victories against the Philistines inspired the Israelites to believe that liberation was possible. Each of Samson's victories was celebrated as a small victory for all Israelites. However, Samson's strength also attracted the Philistines' attention and fury, who saw him as a significant threat to their dominance. The pursuit of Samson was relentless. But he continued to fight, fueling the flame of hope among his people. Even under oppression, the Israelite culture and traditions found ways to survive. Stories of past heroes and divine promises were passed down from generation to generation, keeping the flame of Israelite identity alive. Secret religious ceremonies, clandestine gatherings, and the oral transmission of legends and teachings helped maintain social cohesion and faith in a better future. These small acts of cultural resistance were crucial for the survival of the Israelite spirit. The determination of the Israelites to maintain their identity and faith, even under oppression, is a lesson in resilience. They showed that even in the worst circumstances, it is possible to find ways to resist and preserve what is most important. This silent and persistent resistance was a way to fight against Philistine domination, showing that physical oppression could not destroy the essence of a people. Each preserved ritual, each story told, was a victory against the oppressors. The 40 years of Philistine oppression were a period of great difficulties, but also of important lessons. They showed the Israelites the importance of unity, faith, and resistance. Each lost battle was a step toward the final victory, as it strengthened the fighting spirit and determination of the people. This long night of oppression paved the way for the dawn of a new era, where freedom and justice would finally prevail. And it is in this light of hope that Samson's story continues to shine. It all began with an unexpected visit from an angel. Manoah's wife, a man from the tribe of Dan, was distressed by her inability to have children. On an ordinary day, while carrying out her daily tasks, a celestial being appeared before her. This angel of the Lord brought an extraordinary message. She would conceive a son who would have a grand purpose. It was a moment of divine revelation that would change not only her life, but the entire nation of Israel. The angel's visit was a harbinger that times of change were coming. The angel instructed Manoah's wife to follow a Nazirite vow, a promise of devotion to God, even before the birth of her son. This included abstaining from wine and fermented drinks, and the prohibition of cutting the boy's hair. This vow was a sign that her son would be consecrated to God from the womb. The angel's message was clear. Her son, Samson, would be a divine instrument to liberate Israel from Philistine oppression. The magnitude of this responsibility was overwhelming, but also a sign of hope for a distressed people. When Manoah heard his wife's account, he was perplexed and wanted to confirm the divine message. He prayed for the angel to return and give more instructions on how they should raise the promised boy. God answered his prayer, and the angel appeared again, this time to both of them. Manoah, with reverence, asked the angel how they should raise the boy. The instructions were repeated. The mother should follow the Nazirite vow during pregnancy, and after the birth, Samson should be raised under the same rules. The solemnity of the moment was palpable, and Manoah understood the importance of the divine mission. The angel's news brought a mix of joy and responsibility. Manoah's wife, now aware of her miraculous pregnancy, felt a deep connection to her son's purpose. Each movement of the baby in her womb was a reminder of the divine promise. She rigorously followed the angel's instructions, abstaining from pleasures and foods that could compromise the Nazirite vow. Manoah's support was unconditional. He became a vigilant guardian of the angel's words. Together, they awaited Samson's birth with hope and awe. Samson was born under a sign of promise. From his first cry, his parents knew he was special. His name, derived from the Hebrew word for son, symbolized the light he would bring to Israel. Early on, signs of his strength and destiny began to manifest. The stories of his childhood are filled with episodes indicating his prodigious strength. But more than physical strength, there was a tangible spiritual presence around him. His parents watched with care and devotion, ensuring he followed the path laid out by the angel. As he grew, Samson was instructed in the traditions of his people and the stories of his ancestors. He knew his life had a greater purpose, something beyond normal human capabilities. His parents' teachings, based on the angel's words, shaped his character and actions. Each lesson was imbued with meaning, reinforcing the importance of his mission. Samson was constantly reminded of the Nazirite vow and the need to keep his consecration to God intact. This commitment was the foundation of his identity. Despite the grandeur of his purpose, Samson was human, and like all of us, had his weaknesses and challenges. The promise of an angel did not make him immune to the world's temptations. His parents, aware of this, sought to protect and guide him. However, the extraordinary strength he possessed often made him feel invincible, which could lead to arrogance and carelessness. The angel's teachings, however, always returned to his mind, reminding him of his true source of power and the need for humility. Samson's childhood was marked by moments that foreshadowed his heroic destiny. He demonstrated unusual strength, capable of feats that left those around him awestruck. These demonstrations were not just physical, but also spiritual. There was something in Samson that inspired confidence and hope in his people. Each time he overcame a challenge, it was seen as a sign that liberation was near. His parents, though proud, were also aware of the dangers that surrounded him and the responsibilities that weighed on his shoulders. The Nazirite vow, which included never cutting his hair, was a constant symbol of his consecration to God. For Samson, his hair was more than a physical trait. It was a reminder of his commitment and destiny. He grew up understanding that his strength came from his obedience to the vow and the divine will. His parents reinforced this belief, repeatedly telling him the story of the angel and the promise made before his birth. This formative narrative was central to his identity and the mission he was destined to fulfill. The divine presence in Samson's life was evident not only to him, but to everyone around him. There was a sense of purpose that guided his actions and decisions. However, like any person, he faced doubts and uncertainties. With each challenge, he sought strength in the angel's promise and the faith his parents had instilled in him. This spiritual foundation was crucial for facing the adversities that would come. The angel's story was not just a reminder of the past, but a constant guide for the present and future. The divine promise shaped not only Samson's life, but also that of his family and the entire community. There was an expectation that he would be the liberator, the hero who would bring peace and freedom to Israel. This pressure was great, but it also served as motivation. Each victory, each demonstration of strength, was seen as a step towards liberation. The Israelites placed their hopes in Samson, seeing in him the fulfillment of divine promises. The faith of his people was a force that propelled Samson to continue, even in the most difficult moments. Samson grew up surrounded by stories of faith and courage. His parents, always attentive, ensured that he understood the importance of his role. The stories of the ancestors, of God's great deeds, were told and retold, reinforcing the idea that Samson was part of something much greater. He was not just an individual with superhuman strength, he was an instrument in God's hands. This deep understanding of his purpose was what guided and strengthened him in his journey. Every day of Samson's life was lived under the shadow of the divine promise. He understood that his strength and abilities were not for his personal benefit, but for God's glory and the liberation of his people. This sense of mission drove him to train, to prepare for the battles that would come. He knew that each of his actions had consequences, not just for him, but for the entire nation. The responsibility weighed heavily, but it also gave meaning to his existence. The angel's visit was a turning point in Samson's story. It brought clarity about his purpose and prepared him for the challenges he would face. His parents, guardians of this promise, played a crucial role in ensuring he never strayed from the path laid out for him. Their faith, combined with Samson's strength and determination, was the key to Israel's liberation. And so, with this solid foundation, Samson was ready to face the Philistines and fulfill his destiny. As a child, Samson demonstrated prodigious strength that left everyone around him awestruck. His ability was not just a matter of muscles, but a combination of physical strength and a divine purpose. One of the first signs of his exceptional strength occurred when he was still a young man. Once, while walking through the vineyards of Timnah, a young and fierce lion leapt in his path. Without hesitation, Samson grabbed the lion and with his bare hands tore it apart as if it were a young goat. This extraordinary feat was not just an example of his strength, but also a sign that he was destined for great deeds. The news of this feat spread quickly, and the Israelites began to see Samson as a rising hero. Stories about him were told with reverence and admiration. Each account of his exploits became a legend, inspiring young and old to believe that liberation from the Philistines was near. Samson was not just a warrior, He was a symbol of hope. With each enemy he defeated, his people's confidence grew, and the flame of resistance burned brighter. His prodigious strength was seen as a divine gift, an answer to the prayers of an oppressed people. Despite his impressive strength, Samson faced challenges that went beyond the physical. He had to deal with the expectations of his people and the constant threat of the Philistines. Each victory was accompanied by new challenges and greater risks. But Samson never backed down. His determination and courage were unwavering. He knew his strength was a gift from God and that he had a greater purpose. This awareness kept him focused, even when the adversities seemed insurmountable. Samson's true strength lay not just in his muscles but in his faith and resilience. Samson's life was filled with epic confrontations with the Philistines. On one occasion, using only a donkey's jawbone, he managed to defeat 1,000 Philistines. This feat was not just a demonstration of his physical strength, but also of his strategic capability and combat skill. Samson used whatever was at hand and turned any object into a deadly weapon. Each victorious battle sent a clear message to the Philistines. The Israelites would not be easily subdued. Samson, with his prodigious strength, was the embodiment of his people's resistance and hope. Samson's strength wasn't limited to the battlefield. On various occasions, he used his strength to perform incredible feats that defied logic and physics. For example, he tore off the gates of the city of Gaza and carried them to the top of a hill. This act was not just a display of brute strength, but also a symbol of defiance against the Philistine oppressors. It was as if Samson were saying, "You may try to imprison me, but my strength and determination cannot be contained." This act of defiance resonated deeply among the Israelites, reinforcing the idea that freedom was possible. As Samson continued to impress with his strength, he also faced constant attempts by the Philistines to capture or neutralize him. They knew that as long as Samson was free, their domination over the Israelites was at risk. On numerous occasions, the Philistines plotted to capture him, but they always underestimated his strength and cunning. Samson was not just strong, he was also intelligent and astute, able to turn situations to his advantage, even in the most unfavorable circumstances. This combination of strength and intelligence made him a formidable and nearly undefeatable adversary. Samson also knew how to use his strength to inspire and lead. In a society where physical strength was highly valued, he stood out not just as a warrior, but as a leader. His victories on the battlefield not only weakened the Philistines, but also united the Israelites around a common cause. He became a symbol of resistance and resilience, inspiring others to rise up and fight for their freedom. His leadership was based on action and example, showing that true strength comes from commitment to a greater purpose. Samson's strength was also a source of pride and identity for the Israelites. In a time of oppression and subjugation, he was a beacon of hope and a reminder of divine power. The stories of his feats were told and retold, each time more embellished, becoming legends that inspired future generations. Samson was seen as chosen by God, a living example of what faith and determination could achieve. His strength was a testament to the power of faith and divine promise, something everyone could admire and aspire to. However, Samson's strength also attracted the unwanted attention of cunning enemies. The Philistines, unable to defeat him in direct combat, sought ways to exploit and neutralize his strength. It was a constant battle not just against Philistine soldiers, but against their intrigues and betrayals. Samson had to be ever vigilant, knowing that any lapse could be fatal. This constant tension shaped his life and actions, making each victory even more significant and each defeat a valuable lesson. Even with all the adversities, Samson never lost sight of his purpose. He knew that his strength was not just to defeat enemies, but to inspire and protect his people. Each battle won was a step towards the liberation of the Israelites. He saw his life as a mission, one that required not just physical strength, but also wisdom and faith. His journey was filled with challenges, but also moments of glory and inspiration. Samson understood that his strength came from God, and that as long as he maintained his faith, he could overcome any obstacle. Samson's story is a powerful reminder that true strength goes beyond muscles. It is a combination of faith, determination, and purpose. Samson used his strength not just to protect his people, but also to inspire them to believe in something greater. His life was a testimony to divine power and the importance of staying true to one's purpose. He teaches us that no matter how great the challenges, faith and determination can help us overcome them. And so, Samson continues to be a source of inspiration, a living proof that true strength comes from the heart and soul. Samson, with all his strength and determination, was also a man of intense passions. One of his greatest challenges did not come from the battlefields, but from love. He fell in love with a Philistine woman, a choice that brought with it a series of complications and warnings. His parents, knowing the dangers of getting involved with pagans, tried to dissuade him. "Why not choose a woman from our own tribe?" they pleaded. But Samson's heart was set, and he followed his desire, ignoring his parents' wise counsel. This passion for a Philistine woman was viewed with distrust and concern by everyone around him. The Israelites feared that this relationship could compromise his mission and even his safety. But Samson, guided by his emotions, saw only the love he felt. To him, this woman was different, special. He believed he could change destiny with the strength of his feelings. This forbidden love, however, was the beginning of a series of events that would culminate in his downfall. It is a reminder that even the strongest are vulnerable when it comes to matters of the heart. The marriage to the Philistine woman brought moments of happiness, but also many challenges. The Philistines, aware of the union, saw an opportunity to weaken Samson. In an attempt to solve a riddle during the wedding feast, his wife was pressured to betray Samson. She gave in to the Philistines' threats, leading to a series of events that resulted in distrust and anger. Samson, feeling betrayed, reacted with strength and vengeance. The relationship, which began with love and passion, quickly turned into distrust and conflict. It was a harbinger of future tragedies. The story of Samson and his Philistine wife is a classic example of how passions can cloud judgment. Even being a powerful warrior, Samson was vulnerable to love. His story teaches us that impulsive decisions based on emotions can have severe consequences. His parents, aware of the dangers, tried to guide him, but he chose to follow his heart. This choice brought both moments of joy and pain. It is a reminder that we must balance the heart with reason, especially when the consequences can be so profound. Despite the warnings and complications, Samson continued to follow his heart. He believed that love could overcome any obstacle. However, more and more he found himself in complicated situations because of his romantic choices. His involvement with Philistine women not only put his mission at risk, but also his own life. But love is a powerful and often blinding force. Samson, with all his physical strength, was unable to resist the temptations of the heart. This duality between strength and vulnerability is what makes his story so fascinating and tragic. Samson's romantic relationships also reflected the complexity of interactions between the Israelites and the Philistines. Each romance was a microcosm of the larger tensions and conflicts between the two nations. The Philistines, on one hand, saw in Samson a threat, but also an opportunity to weaken the Israelites through emotional manipulation. The Israelites, on the other hand, viewed Samson's choices with concern, fearing that his passions would lead him away from his divine purpose. This complex dynamic added an extra layer of tension to each relationship. Samson's passion for Delilah, one of the most well-known, was the pinnacle of his disastrous romantic choices. Delilah, seductive and cunning, was encouraged by the Philistine leaders to discover the secret of Samson's strength. In return, she would receive a large sum of money. Samson, blinded by love, did not see Delilah's true intentions. She manipulated him emotionally, leading him to reveal the secret of his strength. His hair had never been cut, in adherence to the Nazirite vow. This revelation was the key to Samson's downfall, showing how his passions led to his ruin. Delilah's betrayal was a devastating blow to Samson. He, who always considered himself invincible, was betrayed by someone he loved. This betrayal was not just a physical defeat, but also an emotional and spiritual one. The Philistines, now knowing the secret of his strength, cut his hair while he slept. Samson woke up weak, unable to defend himself, and was captured. This sequence of events showed how his passions, when unchecked, could be used against him. It was a painful lesson about trust and vulnerability. Samson, now blind and imprisoned, had plenty of time to reflect on his choices. He understood that his passions and desires had blinded him as much as the blade that took his sight. Delilah's betrayal was a turning point, forcing him to confront his own weaknesses. In his darkness, he found a new strength, not physical but spiritual. He prayed to God, asking for one last chance to redeem himself. This introspection showed that even in the worst situations, it is possible to find redemption and purpose. Samson's story and his dangerous loves serve as a warning about the risks of blindly following the heart. Emotions are powerful and can lead us to make decisions that are not the best for our well-being or mission. However, it is also a story of hope and redemption. Even after making grave mistakes, Samson found a way to redeem himself and fulfill his destiny. This teaches us that despite wrong choices, there is always an opportunity to correct our course and find a greater purpose. Samson, despite all his flaws, showed that true strength goes beyond the physical. His romantic journey, full of ups and downs, reflected the complexity of the human condition. He reminds us that we are all vulnerable to temptations, and that often our greatest battles are fought within ourselves. But he also shows us that it is possible to find strength and redemption, even in the most difficult situations. His story is a testament to the power of faith and the ability to overcome, something we can all admire and seek in our own lives. Samson's anger reached its peak when he discovered that his wife had been given to another man. This act of betrayal awakened an uncontrollable fury in Samson, who decided to take revenge on the Philistines in a way no one could have imagined. He captured 300 foxes, a monumental task in itself, and tied burning torches to their tails. This act was not just a demonstration of his strength and cunning, but also a way to show the Philistines that he could not be subdued or humiliated without consequences. The foxes, frightened and in panic, ran through the Philistines' grain fields, setting everything in their path on fire. The destruction caused by Samson was immense. The Philistines' wheat fields, vineyards, and olive groves were reduced to ashes. This act of revenge had a devastating impact on the Philistine economy, demonstrating that Samson possessed not only physical strength, but also a sharp strategic mind. The message was clear. Any attempt to subjugate or humiliate him would result in severe consequences. The Philistines, accustomed to subjugating the Israelites, now found themselves powerless before Samson's wrath. This revenge was not just personal, but also a declaration of war against the oppressors of his people. Samson's act of capturing and using foxes as instruments of revenge is one of the most unusual and fascinating stories in the Old Testament. This episode shows not only his physical strength, but also his ability to use nature to his advantage. It is a demonstration that true strength lies not only in muscles but also in the mind. By thinking outside the box, Samson managed to inflict a severe blow on the Philistines, something that conventional battles had failed to do. This act of revenge was as much a psychological blow as it was a physical one, shaking the Philistines' confidence in their superiority. Samson's fury was fueled by both personal betrayal and the ongoing oppression of his people. Each torch tied to a fox's tail was a symbol of his anger and desire for justice. The flames that consumed the Philistines' fields were a physical manifestation of his hatred and determination. This act of revenge was a way for Samson to express his pain and frustration, turning his anger into action. The devastation of the fields was a clear message that he would not be a passive victim, but an active and relentless warrior against his oppressors. The Philistines' response to the destruction of their fields was swift and brutal. They sought revenge, capturing and killing Samson's wife and her father. This cycle of violence and retaliation created an environment of constant conflict and tension. With each act of revenge, hostilities between Samson and the Philistines intensified. However, each action by the Philistines only fueled Samson's anger further, making him even more determined to fight against them. This spiral of violence showed the intensity of the conflict and the depth of hatred between the two sides. The devastation caused by Samson had a profound effect on the Israelite and Philistine communities. For the Israelites, it was a sign that there was still hope and strength to resist oppression. Samson's courage and determination inspired others to believe that freedom was possible. For the Philistines, it was a constant reminder that their domination was not unquestionable. With each field burned, with each harvest destroyed, they saw the fierce determination of a man who would not bow down. This act of revenge was a turning point, changing the dynamics of the conflict between the two peoples. Samson's story of revenge is an example of how anger and pain can be channeled into powerful actions. However, it also serves as a warning about the dangers of letting anger control our actions. The destruction of the Philistines' fields brought temporary relief and a psychological victory, but also resulted in more violence and suffering. The spiral of revenge and retaliation shows how violence often begets more violence, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. Samson's story reminds us of the need to find ways to resolve conflicts that do not perpetuate pain and hatred. Samson's revenge also raised questions about justice and morality. While his anger and actions were understandable given the betrayal he suffered, the consequences of his actions affected many innocent lives. The burned fields represented not only the loss of resources for the Philistines, but also the destruction of livelihoods for many families. This moral complexity is an important part of Samson's story, showing that the lines between justice and revenge can be blurred and difficult to discern. His story challenges us to think deeply about the consequences of our actions and the ways we seek justice. Despite all the destruction, Samson maintained a clear vision of his purpose. He knew that his mission went beyond his own pain and personal traumas. Each act of revenge was also a step towards the liberation of his people. He saw his fight against the Philistines as a just battle, a war for freedom and justice. This conviction gave him the strength to continue, even when the odds were against him. For Samson, each battle lost or won was part of a greater war, a fight for the survival and dignity of his people. Samson's story teaches us about the complexity of human nature. He was a man of strength and weakness, of great courage and deep vulnerability. His acts of revenge, though violent, were also an expression of his love for his people and his quest for justice. His life is a reminder that even heroes have flaws, and that true strength comes from the ability to keep fighting, even when all seems lost. Samson, with all his strength and determination, is a powerful example of how pain and anger can be transformed into actions that change the course of history. Samson's downfall began with a betrayal that would be the lowest point of his life. Delilah, the woman he loved, was bribed by the Philistines to discover the secret of his strength. Samson, blinded by love and trusting her, revealed that his strength lay in his hair, which had never been cut in accordance with the Nazirite vow. While he slept, Delilah cut his hair, and when he awoke, Samson discovered that his strength had left him. The Philistines quickly captured him, and in a cruel act, blinded him, taking his sight forever. This was the beginning of a new phase of humiliation and suffering for the once powerful hero. Samson's blindness was not only physical, but also symbolic. He, who had been blinded by love and misplaced trust, was now truly without sight. The Philistines took him to Gaza, where he was forced to grind grain in prison, a degrading job usually reserved for the weakest and most despised. Each turn of the millstone was a reminder of Delilah's betrayal and the loss of his strength and freedom. This period of his life was an extreme test of his faith and resilience. Samson, the man who was once feared and revered, was now a shadow of his former self, humiliated and powerless. Even in the darkness of prison, Samson found a form of hope. He knew that although his physical strength was gone, his connection with God remained. With each passing day, his hair began to grow again, symbolizing a possible restoration of his strength. This growth was not just physical, but also spiritual. Samson began to reflect on his mistakes and seek a new connection with God. This introspection and spiritual renewal were signs that even in the worst circumstances, there is always an opportunity for redemption and transformation. Life in prison was harsh and relentless. Samson, who was used to using his strength to accomplish great feats, was now relegated to a life of hard labor and constant humiliation. The Philistines, taking advantage of his condition, often displayed him as a trophy of their victory. Each laugh, each insult, was a bitter reminder of his fall. However, instead of succumbing to despair, Samson used this time to strengthen his faith. He knew his mission was not over, and that God still had plans for him. This period of suffering became a process of spiritual refinement, preparing him for his final redemption. The days in prison allowed Samson to reflect on his life and choices. He recognized that his strength had been a gift from God, but he had failed to use it with wisdom and humility. The blindness and humiliation he now faced were the price of his impulsive decisions and misplaced trust. This self-reflection brought a new understanding of his purpose and dependence on God. Samson began to see that his true strength lay not only in his muscles, but in his faith and obedience to God. This new perspective prepared him for the mission that still lay ahead. Samson's story in prison is a testament to the power of faith and resilience. Even at his lowest point, he did not lose hope. Each day was a struggle, but also an opportunity to reconnect with God. The strength he had lost was beginning to return, not just physically, but spiritually. The Philistines, in their arrogance, underestimated Samson's ability to recover. They saw only a defeated man, but they could not perceive the spiritual growth happening within him. This slow and silent recovery was a prelude to his redemption. The growth of Samson's hair in prison was a visible sign that God had not abandoned him. Each strand that grew back was a reminder of God's promise and the Nazirite vow he had taken. Samson knew that his strength was closely linked to his obedience and devotion to God. He began to pray fervently, asking for forgiveness and a new chance to fulfill his purpose. This spiritual renewal was what he needed to face future challenges. Blindness and humiliation had transformed him, making him stronger in spirit and more determined to fulfill God's will. The Philistines, celebrating their victory over Samson, frequently held festivals and celebrations where they displayed the captured hero. They believed they had triumphed completely, that the threat of Samson had been neutralized forever. However, in their blindness, they failed to realize that they were fueling Samson's renewed determination and faith. Every insult and humiliation only strengthened his resolve. He knew that an opportunity would come, and he was determined to seize it. His faith in God was his true strength, and he was ready to use it when the right moment came. Samson's story in prison is a powerful example of redemption and resilience. It teaches us that even when we are at our lowest point, there is always a chance to rise again. Faith and determination can help us overcome the hardest adversities. Samson, with all his physical strength, discovered that his true strength lay in his faith and relationship with God. This lesson is something we can all apply in our own lives. No matter how great the challenges we face, there is always hope if we maintain our faith and determination. Samson's journey from strength to humiliation and eventually to redemption is a testament to the transformative power of faith. It shows us that even in the most difficult circumstances, we can find a way to reconnect with our purpose and find strength in our faith. Samson, blind and humiliated, found a new spiritual strength that prepared him for his final act of redemption. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength comes from within, and that with faith and determination, we can overcome any obstacle. And so Samson's story continues, preparing for his last and greatest act of strength and faith. In the darkness of his prison, Samson found a new strength. His hair was growing back, but more importantly, his faith was being renewed. He spent endless hours in prayer, seeking guidance and strength from the Lord. He knew he had failed many times, but he also believed that God still had a purpose for him. This unwavering faith amid adversity was what kept Samson firm. Each day in prison was a step towards redemption. He felt that his moment of glory was still to come, even in the darkest of circumstances. The Philistines, ignoring Samson's spiritual renewal, continued to use him as a piece of entertainment in their celebrations. At a grand festival in honor of their god Dagon, they brought Samson to display him before a jubilant crowd. They believed their victory over him was complete and final. However, Samson's true strength lay in his faith and God's promise. When brought to the temple, he asked the young boy who guided him to place him between the two central pillars that supported the building. This simple request would be the beginning of his final act of redemption. With his hands on the pillars, Samson prayed to the Lord one last time. He asked God to grant him strength to avenge the loss of his eyes. His prayer was not just a cry for physical strength, but an appeal for redemption and the fulfillment of his divine purpose. He knew this would be his final act, a last sacrifice to fulfill his mission of freeing his people. God's answer came in the form of overwhelming strength that began to flow through his body. Samson, with all his faith and determination, pushed the pillars with all the might he possessed. The temple began to tremble, and within seconds, the pillars gave way. The roof collapsed, crushing everyone inside, including the Philistine leaders and thousands of spectators. This act of strength destroyed the Philistine power center and brought a significant victory for the Israelites. Samson sacrificed his life, but his final act ensured the liberation of his people from Philistine oppression. The tragedy of his life was redeemed by this last heroic sacrifice. He proved that even in the most desperate circumstances, faith and determination can bring victory. Samson's death was a moment of deep sadness and celebration for the Israelites. They mourned the loss of their hero, but also recognized the impact of his sacrifice. He had fulfilled his destiny, and his life, with all its flaws and triumphs, served as a powerful testimony of faith and redemption. The Israelites buried Samson in the tomb of his father Manoah, honoring his memory and his sacrifice. Samson's story continued to be told for generations as an example of strength, faith, and the ability to find redemption even in the most difficult circumstances. Samson's story teaches us that true strength comes from within, and that even when all seems lost, we can still find purpose and fulfill our destiny. His final sacrifice was an act of redemption that brought freedom to his people. He shows us that with faith and determination, we can overcome our failures and make a lasting impact on the world. Samson's life is a powerful lesson about the importance of trusting in God and using our abilities and gifts for the greater good. His legacy is a reminder that no matter how great the adversity, there is always a chance for redemption. Samson, in his journey of strength and weakness, of victory and defeat, is a reflection of the human condition. We all have our internal and external battles, our moments of doubt and faith. Samson's story encourages us to persevere, to keep fighting, and to seek redemption in our darkest moments. It reminds us that true strength is not just in our muscles but in our spirit and our faith. And that with determination and trust in God, we can turn our weaknesses into strengths and our failures into victories. Samson's sacrifice was an act of love and devotion to his people. He chose to give his life to save others, a gesture that echoes through history as the ultimate example of selflessness and courage. His life, full of highs and lows, culminated in a final act of heroism that ensured his redemption and immortalized his name in history. Samson shows us that redemption is possible, even for those who make mistakes, and that each of us has the ability to make a significant difference in the world. His story is a testament to the power of faith and the human capacity to rise above circumstances. As we reflect on Samson's life, we are reminded of our own journey and the choices we make. He teaches us the importance of keeping faith, even when facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. His life encourages us to seek redemption and to use our abilities and talents for the greater good. Samson, with all his strength and weakness, is an example that we can all find purpose and make a lasting impact. His story is a continuous inspiration for all those who seek to live a life of faith, courage, and determination. Now that you have heard Samson's story, it is time to reflect on the deep lessons it brings. His life was a mixture of triumph and tragedy, of strength and weakness, but above all, of redemption. Samson shows us that no matter how many mistakes we make, there is always an opportunity to redeem ourselves and make a difference. His journey is a powerful reminder that true strength comes from within, and that with faith and determination, we can overcome the greatest challenges. Think about your own life. What are the challenges you face today? How can you use Samson's story to find strength in moments of weakness? Perhaps you are struggling with difficult choices or feeling overwhelmed by the consequences of past decisions. Remember that each day is a new opportunity to reconnect with your purpose and seek redemption. Samson found strength in his faith and his commitment to a greater purpose. And you, where will you find your strength? To continue this journey of learning and inspiration, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.
Let the Word of God touch your heart, like a light guiding you through the darkest moments. Every step in faith is a journey filled with hope. We are never alone on this path. For He is always by our side. Open your heart and let His love transform you, helping you spread that light to those around you.
That way, you won't miss any of the stories and lessons we share, helping you find your own path to redemption and strength. Join us.
Let the Word of God touch your heart, like a light guiding you through the darkest moments. Every step in faith is a journey filled with hope. We are never alone on this path, for He is always by our side. Open your heart and let His love transform you, helping you spread that light to those around you.
And transform your life, just as Samson transformed his, finding purpose and strength in every challenge.